today Erika Mitchell, who is the Vice Chairman of the Council of Urban Boards of Education and also a member of the Board of Education at Atlanta Public Schools.
Yes.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is a great conference here in Atlanta.
Yes, it is.
We're on the third day, so I think most people are more out taking notes and all the speakers that you have here.
Yes.
Really a great conference. You've been instrumental for NSBA in the state of Georgia in writing policies for trauma practices and restorative practices. So congratulations on getting that accomplished, for one.
Thank you.
And tell us something about those.
Oh, wow. So when I look at the whole child approach, one of the things I always ask myself, where is the need? How can we make the student learning environment more enhanceable, more collaborative, and break some of those barriers down that may be a challenge for the students or maybe issues or concerns while the student is having issues with getting a good education. So after doing a little research, I realized that mental health is a big component, a huge component of the success for our students, especially in education. And how can we make sure that they have the resources in the schools that they need? And I like to look at an early intervention approach, because a child can't learn that's been traumatized. A child can't learn that's hungry. A child can't learn that's dehydrated. And, a child can't learn that's been abused or just different things in life experiences.
Yeah.
It's affecting their ability to learn. And so trauma-informed practices is an approach that allow your staff, your teachers, your social workers, your behavior specialists to be trained to identify certain triggers of trauma or adverse childhood experiences that might be affecting these students. Once you identify it, what is the next step? So that next step is to ensure that we have systems of care in the school that support that student with their mental health issues, work through those issues. If it's something at home, guess what? We're here to make sure that we can work with your parent to kind of figure out, or your guardian, how to figure out how can we break down those barriers. If it's something at school, bullying has been a big issue. And looking at bullying, like a lot of kids don't know how to handle it. Bullying, when I was growing up and you was growing up, is different because now it's taking a new form with social media and the internet. We didn't have that. We just had to deal with Big Joe going to school, and that was it. It stayed in school, and maybe you had to run home away from him, but that was it. Now it goes on a black guy. Yeah, now it goes to social media. And one of the things, and I want to share this, one of the reasons why I really focused on that trauma-informed policy, I was elected in 2017. I was sworn in 2018 of January. And 3 months after being sworn in, I received a call from one of the principals at one of the schools that I serve, that a 10-year-old child had committed suicide.
Oh my God.
And I asked myself, what is happening in your life at 10 years old that you did not want to live anymore? That something was affecting you that you just couldn't take it anymore.
Right.
And I asked myself, what could we have done to help this child? And I asked the principal, what could we have done more to help this child? And she said, we did all we could with what we had. And when I thought about that, what did we have?
Yeah.
What did we not have?
Yeah.
We didn't have any, well, I don't want to say we didn't have, we needed additional support for situations like this. And it needs to be taken seriously, not just another child, not just another number. It needs to be handled with care. And I told myself, at that time, because I felt like if this is what I'm getting into 3 months in, I don't know if I'm gonna make it the 4 years of my term, because it hurt so bad. It weighed on me so heavily, because at the time my son was 9 years old. And I'm just thinking like, oh my God, these precious kids. And we have to make sure we have these resources and services in the school. If he needed additional support with mental health, needed additional counselor, school psychiatrist, a mental health specialist, a behavior specialist, whatever it may be, we should have provided that for him. We should have put him on a plan to monitor him, to make sure we saw some type of improvement with any issues that he is having. And again, if it's an issue at home, then we need to work with the families to make sure that we can come to a solution and help both sides of the child and the parents or the family.
Well, kids at 9 are so precious.
They are.
But they're at that age where it's tough.
It is.
It's very tough. She said technology hasn't helped. You know, it's just a heavy burden. Boy, there's a lot. I think you said it well. Thank you for writing that for Georgia and for NSBA. I hope other states are picking up on that.
They are, and you know what I saw this time at the CUBE conference? I saw sessions developed for trauma-informed schools, a collaborative approach. And I saw school districts presenting on that. So I was very excited when I saw that, because now we have to take it from a holistic approach to understand what it means to serve the whole child, and that is that mental health component.
Outstanding. Well, I know there's a lot of listeners that are hearing what you're saying, so certainly please reach out to Erika, to NSBA, because there's a lot of progress that needs to be made in this area.
Yes.
And it needs to happen fairly quickly.
It does.
Because the need is now.
It is.
Let's move on and talk about some of the other, I guess, pressures that are on children today. And that whole area of exploitation is one that you just don't see.
I want to go back to that first year being elected, because that's where everything took place. 6 months after being elected, I had the opportunity to go to juvenile courts here in Fulton County. Fulton County is our county that the city of Atlanta is in. Juvenile courts not only serve Atlanta public school students, they also serve the students of Fulton County School District. Wanted to go visit to kind of see what type of programs, collaboration, interventions we could partner on, because we already had a partnership, but I wanted to learn more about it. I had the opportunity to go visit the trauma department. The trauma department focused on students, children, victims that have been sexually exploited, and known as the word domestic minor sex trafficked. I had no idea what that meant at the time. Again, you don't see it. When we might see it, we might not recognize it. Let me just say that. And after understanding what domestic minor sex trafficking is, and it is, and I'll explain it to you, it is the solicitation to solicitate sex from a minor. And it is done in so many different ways. It could be at a strip club. It could be picking them up from school during lunchtime, and they go and do these sexual acts with these people and bringing them back. Yes. It could be, what's the other way? It could be done through family members. I mean, it can be done from the internet. And that's one of the things that we saw increase during the pandemic was...
Because they're home.
Yes, because they're home. With porn, with social media, and they look for vulnerable kids, vulnerable students, maybe students that come from a broken home, maybe students that don't have good self-esteem or confidence, maybe students that are foster kids that feel like nobody wants them, right? Kids that have been abused, kids that don't have enough attention from their parents or family members. It could be a different combination of things that make these students vulnerable. Maybe they're being bullied at school, being picked on, And so when you look at that and that vulnerability, that's what those traffickers prey on. And so it's easy for them to come online and talk to these kids and give them confidence. You're beautiful, you're this, you're that. Nobody gets you, but I do, And so that opens up that vulnerability for that child. And it makes it very easy for them to approach these students. And what I learned about my visit, I want to go back to the visit at the juvenile courts, that Georgia, Atlanta, had a a high number. One is too many. We should not be any. Let's just say that. And I saw the heat map, and it had a lot of blue dots, and I saw a little bit of them in my area. And I asked, what are those dots? And they were like, those are cases. And I was like, whoa, wow. Cases? What do you mean cases, right? And like, yeah, these are cases of kids that we're dealing with that have been sex trafficked. And I was like, I couldn't believe what I was hearing, that this is happening to our students. And I'm a mother, a parent, and I was, how do I protect my kids, but how do I protect all kids? And again, what are we charged with as board members? Policy development. There was no policy nationwide for this issue. I had to look internationally to see samples of policies and protocols, because this is not only a national issue, this is a international issue. And I looked at countries like Nigeria and England that had some policy development for this, and just kind of looked at how their outline was, and then looked at what was the need in Atlanta public schools, what is the need just in general on how we can develop a policy to serve the students. And we came up with a policy, and that policy basically allow training for educators, anyone that works with the school district, to know those warning and identifying signs, identifiers of potential victims. Awareness means that we're educating our students on what this is and what forms it may take place. I mean, in different ways, right, in different fashions. And then the other thing was, okay, once we identify a student, what's the next step? It's always the next step. And the approach is, one, you don't want to trigger and re-traumatize the student, so you don't have too many people involved. So that's number one. Number two, you want to make sure that there is a process that is followed. So the principal, the counselor, the social worker. Then it goes into your government agencies, right? Wow. Like your, here we call it DFACS, Department of Family Children Services. We have our police department that is brought in too as well. And then we try to make sure that once we have the child in safety and the child is protected, then you come in with those services. That's why the trauma-informed policy is very important, because the child has been traumatized. This is not a normal experience, right? And so you have to rehabilitate that child and make sure they're in a safe environment. And that's really what the policy is structured around. We have to do our part, because the kids are with us, the students are with us 6+ hours a day. And we do have some responsibility with that. And so outside of that policy, well, not outside that policy, within the policy, we allow, once the student has been rehabilitated and want to return to school, they may return to their home school. They don't have to go to another school. They can go back into their home school. There's a plan for them to re-enter. Also, the plan also identifies peer-to-peer recruiting. Peer pressure is big, but peer-to-peer recruiting is different, because you might have a best friend that you trust that's being trafficked and you not know, and you become a part of that situation. And so we don't criminalize the peer recruiter. We treat them as a victim, and we make sure they get help as well. Wow. So it's a lot.
Big scope. And then you're also dealing with exploitation as workers?
As workers, yes.
Vaping now?
Yes, vaping.
It's my gosh. You know.
It's so much. I try to understand why so much is being thrown at the kids. We're adults. We're supposed to protect our kids, our students. And it's a struggle every day. Yeah.
You had a tough 6 months.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
Well, thanks for staying with it and doing all that you're doing today.
Thank you.
I mean, it's amazing. You know, at the conference here, a lot of programs talking about equity, and we know that doesn't mean equal. But equity is just being used in a whole number of ways, and it, probably good intentions, but you need to slow down and really talk about what does that mean. And why don't you share?
Yes. Equity for me, when I look at equity, is meeting our students and families where they are to get them to a certain place. Equality is, you have this side have this side of town have this, you have it as well. But the need may be different. So if you look at, let me just throw this out there, baseball field. We're going to make sure all schools have the same standard of baseball fields, the same standards of books, right? That's equality. But the need might not be baseball fields in some areas.
Right.
The need might be food, because there's food insecurity. There is a food desert, and we might need a food pantry built in the school versus a baseball field. That's equity. So when I look at equity, I look at it from the lens of budget assessment, partnerships for the district, policy, and those whole components has a lot. Oh, I'm sorry, and curriculum. Let me just back up and go to curriculum and student support services. Those are the components that you want to look at the lens of equity and how equity is being rolled out. There's something that's called instructional equity that I'm learning about. Yes.
I hadn't heard that one.
Yes.
What is that?
So instructional equity meaning that, and it's a policy, I cannot remember the school district that just worked that policy or resolution, but it focused on delivering the curriculum and your teaching practices equitably. That is not just, oh, this kid might be behind, we just need to put them on an IEP.
I see.
No.
Right.
No. We got to stop doing that. You know, we have to look at it from a different approach. Pull back those layers. Let's find out why this child is having issues grasping the concept or the fundamentals, and make sure that we align the resources for that student. It also has to do with explicit bias. You have teachers that have their own explicit bias, and they bring it into the classroom. So what you're delivering is not being received because of your biases, right? So you have to look at that as well.
There's all kinds of biases.
It sure is. It sure is.
The list never stops.
It never stops. And so that's a re-education, a retraining, things of that sort. Then also you have to look at within instructional equity is how we rolling out our curriculum equitably. And that has a lot to do with our textbooks or our digital platforms. And that's the other part of it, digital devices. That everyone has one, that's equality. But we have to meet those students where they are to ensure that they're able to navigate through that digital technology. And it might be meeting them where they are is to teach them first how to maneuver and navigate through, and then put on the educational platform. So instructional equity can mean a lot of different components. It is basically what is the need in your district, what are the areas that we know that we need to look through a lens of equity and make equitable. I will also say a budget assessment. Let's look at our budget, how our funds being allocated. That's a big component of equity.
Right. You got to fund the programs.
Yes. Some schools might need additional services, tutoring, interventionists, educational interventionists. And so you want to look at that from a budget standpoint, where those funds need to be allocated to. Some schools might not need as many, but the ones that do, you want to make sure you have those support. And then also with the teaching material, the teaching curriculum as well. If you have one school using something that works really, really well, and then you have another school that doesn't. So how do you make sure that these students getting the same type of curriculum, and that it's been done with fidelity? And so we do have to look at budget, and we do have to look at partnerships as well. Because a lot of times you bring in partners and the name might look good, right? You put the stamp on it, big company, big corporation, and the work might not be getting done for those students. So we do have to look at equity in a lot of different components.
Well, you know, what I've come away with is an observation. I've been involved in designing schools for about 40 years, and the whole idea of designing schools needs to be disrupted, totally. Tear it apart and build back up. I look at the role of the teacher. All these things you're describing, what a teacher has to deal with is different than it was 20 years ago. I'll use 20.
Very.
The design of the buildings, the kind of curriculum, the ability not just to lecture and listen, but to be hands-on learning and a whole different pedagogy and the academic pathways and exploring a child's passion and all those things. There needs to be a lot of change. But
Yes.
people need to understand what that is, and then I think they'll
do.
support it. There are so many more things we could cover. I just want to thank you for being here and sharing with the audience all the concepts and policies and viewpoints. I think you said it pretty well. You've covered kind of holistically, and there's so much more to cover.
There is. It's so much work to do, but we have to work together.
Yeah, I really think.
We have to work
thank
together.
you very
You're
much.
so welcome.
Thank you.